So I want to talk about your A team, right? How do you find your A team? How do you keep your A team? They're big questions. You know, like I've said before on this show, you cannot do anything great in business if you build a business that's based on one person. You know, there's not a great business in the world based on one person. You've got to build team around you. And how many team? More team, right? You've always got to be adding to the team, which means you've got to be adding to the customer base because that's what funds it all. And so, but ultimately, you know, a lot of people do recruiting badly. And so that's what I'm going to talk into. My step-by-step process of finding team that has been used both here and with our clients over the last 12 odd years. So it's an area, like recruiting is an area that Christians do poorly so often, right? For whatever reason. It's, you know, whatever. We're all grace and we don't, you know, I want to be a mission business and employ bad people. That's fine. You can do all those things, but get some great people on your team so that you build a business and then go and find some underperforming team to bring in. Like, I just think they're all bad reasons to go and employ, especially at the start of the journey when every single person matters so much in the recruiting process, right? So I want to talk about it and it'll probably maybe shock you a little bit because it's a very protracted process. The way I look at it is if you're going to let somebody into your business, right, which is this vehicle for you to have a huge amount of impact and make a lot, like it's a big thing to let somebody on your team. And so you want to be putting them through a process that works. Here's the process that doesn't work. You go to church on Sunday and you ask around, right? You know, I'm looking for somebody to work in my business. There's always that one person, usually, you know, the elderly lady, you know, like Auntie Betty, you know, who hears that you're recruiting and will come and say to you, oh, hey, I've got the right person for you. You should go and talk with little Shaniqua. He hasn't got a job. And so the journey keeps going. And so if you do that as your process, like you will end up with bad team members because it's not a process. It is a process. It's a really bad one and it's cheap and weak. And so you will end up with that outcome. So I want to go through a process that is far more robust, really kind of gives you what you want and so forth, right? Then I'm going to answer your questions after I've done this. So when I do recruitment, it's a deselection process, okay? I've got my end game. I know what I'm looking for. I'm going to go back to the market. I'm going to find a group of people. And then it's going to be like a game of Survivor where it's a feeding frenzy and a deselection process. And then I am going to have the best man and the best woman standing at the end. And that's how we're going to do it, right? So I'm not trying to beg anybody to come and work with me. If I find a good candidate and I wanted them, then I might endear myself a little bit more, but I'm never begging because it changes the entire tune from day one and never a good thing. Before you go and start your recruitment process, you should have a position description. You should have an idea of what this role is. It doesn't even need to be perfect. You just need to be able to document the role so that when you get a candidate and you compare it to what you documented, you've got somebody good. For example, I had a chat today with a potential new employee as an intern. Young guy, great. And I just had to put the brakes on because I was, hang on a minute, like before, you know, that all came about quite quickly. Before I jump here, I want to just get my ideas, my thoughts down as to what this role is, and then we'll check whether there's a good fit and move forward. Too many people rushing that part. Get a position description down, or at least know the role so that you can compare the person and so forth, right? Here's what I would say when it comes to people. This isn't even my process. These are the three things I check in order. I want to check they're a culture fit first. I want to check that they're a character fit second. You might be thinking, well, it's always character first. No, it's not always character first. And then thirdly, it's skills. Now you might be thinking, well, of course they've got to have skills. They do have to have skills. Now, you know, if somebody's only got one of these three, it's not going to work. If they've got a good culture fit, like they fit your culture, but they don't have any skills and their character's terrible, it's not going to work. If they've got character, but they're boring or weird and they don't fit your culture, it's not going to work. If they've got no skills, it's not going to work. So for me, this is just my process that I run through when I meet with a potential person to work for me. Is there a culture fit first? Because the culture is more important to me than so much of the stuff in business. I don't want to be at work with people that are weird. Occasionally they sneak through the cracks. And I just want to have an environment that I enjoy coming to. So to me, it's got to be culture fit, number one. Second, character. Do they have integrity? Do I like them? Can I see that they've got a heart for community? Do they do what they say? Do they follow up? Are they diligent? Are they driving this thing? So forth, right? I'm looking for that character. And third of all, they've got skills. And, it's funny. I've employed many people that don't necessarily have the skills for the job, but they've got a real eagerness to learn. They're good students, whatever. They go and learn the job. And quite often when somebody doesn't have the skills, they're cheaper to hire. Therefore, you kind of factored it in that if it takes you 3 months to train them, you're paying them less. So at least you get them at the end of the 3 months exactly how you want them, instead of paying the premium, getting somebody that knows what to do it, but they're not 100% the way you do it, and then you've got to pay a premium to train them. So I'm just a big fan of going through that process in my mind. I want to check those 3 things before I even consider it. All right, now here's the steps, and this is where the process gets pretty heavy. So you run an ad. You might be thinking, well, how should I run an ad? You should run an ad on Seek, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Indeed, anywhere you can. If you can't afford to spend the $300 on a Seek ad, you can't afford the team member, right? So you've got to, don't try and cheap this out, right? By putting a piece of A4 paper up at the local Woolies Woolly board. Just spend the money and put yourself in front of the best possible candidates, right? These are people that are going to make you lots and lots of money, so you want to cast a big net. But you run an ad. Now, the ad, just one of the little hacks here, the ad has to have a tripwire, meaning that we've got to put something in front of them that potentially trips them up. Why? Because if I'm going to run an ad and I'm going to get 50 candidates, I don't want to read 50 CVs, or I don't want to have to deal with 50 people. I want them to deselect. So here's what I mean by trip. I would say something like, send your CV addressed to the business owner with a cover letter explaining the 2 reasons why you're a good candidate by X date. And what that does is, it's so funny. You get those instructions and you would be like, oh, okay, great, I'll just do those things. 50% of the population won't even send a cover letter, even though you explicitly said you've got to send a cover letter. Now, some people will send a cover letter and they'll do a brilliant job, and there's 2 bullet points on why I'm a good candidate. I specifically said send a cover letter addressed to the business owner. So some people will do a cover letter that says to business owner. Now that's okay. It's kind of what I asked for. Some people will go to their way to research who the business owner is and say, hi, Mary. And that's the kind of person we're looking for, right? Because we can find a lot about a person by the fact that they went the extra mile, right? That tells me a lot about their character and their likely culture fit. So we've got to have a tripwire in there. We've got to get them to do something above and beyond, because at the end of the day, if they can't do that, then they're going to be a horrible employee, all right? Now, so the next step after the ad is we get, I'm going to call it an incoming inquiry, right? I know that sounds a little bit like it's a lead, but it kind of is for your team. So when we get an incoming inquiry, there's 2 different ways to do this, okay? So I'm going to run 2 separate kind of strategies at the same time. If you're recruiting a sales role, a front-facing, public-facing, customer-facing type role, a leadership or a management role, then my preferred way to do this is actually to drive them to a phone number. So you put out the ad, and the call to action on the ad is ring this number by this date. And what you do is you go down and you buy a $2 SIM card, and you throw it into a phone, and you record a message, and you say, hey, thanks for inquiring about the job. Please leave your name, number, name and number, and by the way, answer this question for me. This is what you record on your voicemail, and then you leave them a question, and it's a trip hazard, right? And you'll get a bunch of different responses to that. You'll get people that, when they hear that, they go, oh, well, my name's Philip. Yeah, my name's Philip, and I don't know about that question. Oh, I've never really, beep, and it cuts them off because they took too long. Like, these people are like, they're going to be terrible, right? At a front-facing client sales, branding role, they're going to be woeful. Then you'll get some people that they don't do a polished performance, but they just follow the system. That's a good thing. We're not looking for, whatever, showstoppers here. We're looking for people willing to follow your process. And then you get some smart people who hang up because you don't know who that is. They hang up, they go and prepare an answer, they call back, and they're eloquent, and that's kind of cool too. I like that. All right, so if it was a front-facing role, somebody that needed to have that kind of bit of chutzpah about them, then I would do the phone system, okay? The other reason why you do it is then what you do is you wait your 5 days, you call them up, you call up your voicemail, and you can get everybody in one short window that applied for that job, hear them all, and basically go yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And now you don't have to have all these different times that you're reading CVs. You can kind of do it in a condensed time so that you protect your time, right? So you're either going to do phone or you're going to do the email. And the email is the cover letter, okay, where we put up a bit of a tripwire and find out if they do that. Now, the next step that I would always do is I would always do a phone interview. This doesn't have to be much. All I'm trying to find out at phone interview level is, can they talk? I want to find out the obvious things. Like, for example, if I was to run an ad and I get a candidate and that candidate has just moved here from India, there could well be a language barrier that I would want to know about at this stage in the journey before I call them to a meeting, and then it's proper awkward. Doesn't mean they won't get the job, but I want the information early on, with are they eloquent, can they construct sentences, yada, yada, yada. I would want to know that right in the beginning so that I didn't waste their time or mine on progressing it. So the phone interview, what you're covering in the phone interview is the obvious stuff, right? So just checking, what the job is, you've got a license, where we're based, like the real practical element of the role, I would just be checking that stuff. But I'm only really asking those questions, one, to answer those questions, to check them, but also to kind of just have a bit of a chat and riff with somebody and just to kind of gauge how they are so that I don't have to go and block out a 30-minute interview. I can do it in 3 minutes on the phone. All right. Then we're going to have a face-to-face, but we're going to have the first one. Now, in this process here, I personally think that you should give them a test. Maybe you could have them do a DISC profile or a Gallup Strengths Finder, something like that. DISC is probably easier to get them to do and shorter. Gallup can take half an hour, so DISC is 7 minutes. So you could get them to do a DISC. That would be a good idea to find out exactly where they sit. Sorry, this is in here. And at this point here, you're probably doing most of the talking in the first face-to-face, right? You're the one explaining the role, explaining the vision for the role, explaining the vision for the company, getting them a bit excited and so forth, right? So, and then you're going to engage them. Tell us a bit about this. Tell us a bit about this, right? But I like to have a test in there. The other thing I love to do, so you're going to put a test, and then the other thing I like to do is paint a scenario. This is a bit fun for me. For example, if it was a tradie business, for example, I might say, hey, I just want to paint a scenario to you, Shanika. It's 4:45 on a Friday afternoon, and one of our clients, our best clients, calls up and says, we've got a plumbing issue and there's water pouring through the floorboards. How do you handle that? Now, of course, Shanika was most likely to say, oh, well, we do whatever it takes because that's what we do as a job, yada, 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 which is great. That's the answer you want. And by the way, that's what you can then expect from them if you employ them. Sometimes the answer is literally, and this would astound you, the amount of people that are like, oh, I don't know, that's a tricky one. It's like, really? That's a tricky one? Like those people that pay your wages, we're not going to look after them? That's a tricky one, is it? So, all right, so that's that part of the process. So we're going to do a test and a scenario. If you need them to go away and, send you some information, you would do that. For example, some professional services, B2B, might have them go away and write a letter of request or something like that for the job, explaining why they would love to do it, something like that. That's not a bad idea, but not essential. Then I'm going to go with face-to-face, the second one. Now you might be thinking, I've already had an interview. I've done a phone interview, I've done a face-to-face. Why would I have another one? Here is where it starts to get really interesting, because most people are trying to shortcut the journey and recruit quickly. I'm trying to drag it out because I want to find out what truly makes them tick. When it comes to the second meeting, we do this meeting over food or coffee. Primarily food, but if you're employing, people every single month, having lunches too often may be a bit too hard. You may just cut it down to coffee for time's sake. But we really want to have food. And here's the reason why. There is something primal about human beings that when you sit there and eat with them, they open up a lot more. So you can imagine you sit down at a cafe, Waiter comes over, would you like some water, coffee, menus? I'll give you 5 minutes to pick what you want, comes back over, you all order. Now you've got a 20-minute wait, right? So the business owner kind of doesn't say much at this point, and most people can't sit in silence, and so the candidate starts offering up all this information, starts talking or filling the void, and they offered it up, so you're not prying, and you can gain a lot of information about people by doing that. Let me tell you a funny war story. So I went through this process with candidates for a intellectual property firm, so lawyers, but niche down to intellectual property. We were looking for a salesperson for this role. So we went through all this process. Interview one, this guy was impeccably dressed, well presented, stood up and did a big pitch to us on why he should work. We went to the second interview, and we're sitting down, and about halfway through, waiting for our burgers, this guy just goes, I'm a bit dusty. And that pricked our ears up because we're listening for whatever, cues. And the owner of the business is like, oh, what do you mean? He's like, oh, last night we went out with the boys and it was hectic. And he goes on to tell us about how he, got really drunk and had a fight and one of his mates was arrested. And we're like, what? It's like, you're not working for us. And, and so that was really good. We would never have known that based on his interview because he was able to fool us in an interview like most people are because he was slick. But put his guard down and you get to find out the truth. So it's just an opportunity for you to find out a little bit more information and stuff that you wouldn't normally find out and stuff you're not allowed to pry for. So I would certainly be doing a second face-to-face. Then I would do a trial. Big fan of the trial, right? So give them a client to work with, a job, get them in for a day or a few days. Obviously it has to be paid because that's law, but get them in for a trial because, especially trades. The amount of tradey business owners I've known who are like, I've met a candidate, he told me he's brilliant, his resume reads really well, and then they'll put him on the tools, can't even take a wheel off a car. It's like, what? And so if they just employed them, they get, it's disruptive. So put them on a trial and you get to find out whether they can actually do what they just said they could in an interview. Then we make an offer to them, a proper offer for the job. Then we start them. And then just to go one bit further, we do reviews. And we do reviews on day 1, week 1, and month 1. And they're just kind of informal. End of day 1, hey Shaniqua, just checking in with you. How was your first day? Da, 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 da. End of week 1, hey, sit down, let's have a chat. What did you like about it? What can we do better? How do we serve you better? End of month 1, all right, this is more formal. Tell us, give us some feedback on the job. What do you like? What do you don't like? What can we do better to make sure you're more efficient? Yada, 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 okay? If you go through that process, and by the way, most people are trying to shortcut it. The reason why I add this middle section is because we need to be slow to hire and quick to fire, right? Slow to hire. If you slow it down, you will catch people. Now, I understand some of you will be like, we don't have the luxury of doing this in rural Australia. I understand. But I would still add steps to my process rather than shortcut the journey, because when you shortcut, you massively increase your chances of catching the wrong people. And it's so hard under Australian law, it's so hard to get people out. If they've been there 6 months, it's so hard. Under 6 months, if you're a small business, it's a bit easier. But after 6 months, if you've had them and you've trained them and you've been through that and they know their rights and they will usually use them. So that to me is the process, and it's the best I've seen to be able to catch the truth. And if somebody's going to stick with you through that process, what they're also saying to you is, I really want this job, and I really appreciate your vision. I really appreciate where you're going. All right, that's kind of what it means.